Okay, good morning, everybody. Thanks for joining me here at the 2020 Virtual Meeting of the Minds. I hope everybody's doing well. And we're going to talk a little bit about chaos in the data world. There's enough chaos in the real world, but I'm going to talk a little bit about the struggle that some of us face of trying to keep all of our business intelligence tools, our data, our documents, our systems in order. And making it easy for users to find things and locate the information that they need. Let's start off here. I'll just tell you a little bit about myself. I always like to include this picture here of me as a grade schooler, just to prove that data nerds are born and not made. At least I think so. So I am the Senior Director of Advancement Services and Information Systems at Pomona College. I've been there about 12 years and head up a team of about 9 of us. And we have about 1.5 people that are dedicated strictly to business intelligence. And then I'm actually transitioning in the next few months into doing consulting full time. I've been doing consulting for about 5 years for a number of hospital organizations, doing some of the same stuff that I do for Pomona, business intelligence work, business process design, procedures, training, that kind of thing. So I kind of have two lives going on at the moment. A little bit about Pomona College. We're a liberal arts college established in 1887. We're in Claremont, part of the Claremont colleges. We have about 1,600 students at Pomona. Pomona College's advancement shop went to Razor's Edge in August of 2010. And as I mentioned before, we have about 1.5 people dedicated. We have one full-time person who does data warehousing and report writing. And then we have kind of a combination of a couple other people that also help with report writing, depending on the need. Okay, so let's start with some sort of big picture concepts, some realities that we're all kind of facing. Our organizations are embarking upon increasingly ambitious campaigns. Of course, some of that may change given the current world realities. But at the time that I was putting this presentation together, we were at Pomona talking about going from our last campaign of being 300 million to, considerably more into the next campaign. And so the competition for fundraising dollars is growing as each of us are trying to increase our levels of performance. And I think it's fair to say, given, technology is great, but it also can create a lot of overwhelming points of contact for people, and it's becoming more and more difficult to reach audiences by conventional means. So not as many people have landlines anymore, so the traditional phone-a-thon programs are not as successful as they used to be. Even conventional things like blast emails, it can be harder to get through the noise, right? Unless they're really targeted and specific, because there's so many organizations that are trying to do that. And then all of us, of course, are under pressure to keep the cost of raising a dollar low. So, we want to be smart, especially if we're a nonprofit organization, about how we use our money. And, we can't just throw an infinite number of darts at the dartboard and hope something sticks, because we all have fixed resources. And so making intelligent choices about how we use those resources are really important. So what does that mean kind of for us? The first, as I was just alluding to, is information really needs to be used as intelligence. And so data being available at your fingertips, not this sort of painful manual process of pulling lists and queries and merging lots of different data sets from different sources manually only to redo it again. You need to have that information kind of at your fingertips to make smart business decisions, right? And that information used as intelligence can be for relationship building, for data mining, or as I mentioned just now, making strategic decisions about how to allocate your resources. So, a great data visualization that we worked on sort of recently was looking at all of our events across the country. How many people are coming to events, how many of those people that are coming to events went on to become donors, how many of them are volunteers, is there any correlation between event attendance and being a volunteer or becoming a donor, how many of our top prospects are coming to events, and then of course how much money are we spending on events, and are we getting a good return on our investment for how we're using those dollars. The other piece, though, that is really kind of more my gig probably is about inefficiencies. So I think all of us in the advancement services world, and even in the annual giving world as well, because they're often doing a lot of this mass list pulling or mass downloading of data to be able to do their analyses, is that that's usually often done in really, really inefficient ways, right? Depending on your data extraction tools, you sometimes are pulling it out into Excel or maybe putting it into Access, or if you have, maybe you have all of your data in your primary database, but then somebody hands you a list in Excel that they kind of want merged with that. And so you're manually doing a lot of this work. And it's really, given the realities and the pressures of our fundraising, we just can't afford to spend that amount of time doing manual, tedious things. It's just a waste of energy that we could be putting toward our highest missions. So the other reality that I would say is something that's happened in the last, probably 5 to 6 years, certainly at least in my career, is this kind of explosion of business intelligence tools. So in an effort to address some of these problems of, okay, you have a primary database system where it's easy to record all your data, but it's hard to get it out, right? Or it's hard to get it out and visualize it for people in a way that they can understand it. And so in response to that, the market has expanded to include a lot of new business intelligence tools. So at Pomona, for example, we started with Cognos a long time ago, probably 12 years ago at least, when it was called Report Studio. Or no, I think it was called Impromptu. It was Impromptu, then it went to Report Studio, and now it's Cognos Analytics. So we probably have thousands of reports that were written in Cognos, mostly for list purposes, not so much data visualization, especially because at the time, Cognos wasn't really designed for that. And for that reason, the college then adopted Tableau. So Tableau, as many of you know, is a great tool for visualizing data, especially data that you want to have your users kind of interact with. Not so great, on the other hand, for list reports or for printer-friendly reports. It's really meant to be something beautiful that you see on the screen and you interact with. Just recently, they've given you the option to kind of download a visualization into PowerPoint. But even that's not a great way to kind of extract visuals onto paper or PDF. Then in our case, even though we had Cognos and Tableau, we contracted with a vendor, their name is Raising Insight, and they've put together a group of colleges that had these kind of reporting needs and developed a data warehouse and a set of reports, probably over 1,000 reports that could be kind of distributed out of the box to these different organizations. And we contracted with them in part because we wanted all of the reports, in part because we wanted to be part of this user community of really power users who were informing the kinds of reports and analyses that Raising Insight was putting out. Our pause about it, though, was that the whole platform was built on Microsoft SQL reporting services. So we already had reports in Cognos, already had reports in Tableau. We had less expertise in SQL reporting services. So it kind of created this conundrum, like, what do we do here with these 3 different platforms? And then fairly recently, in probably the last 3 months, we've had some users inquire about using PowerBI. And again, different, and I'll talk more about this later in the presentation, but different tools are used for different kinds of purposes. It's some are designed for one thing, some are designed for another, some are easier to learn than others. Power BI is very easy to learn, especially if you're an Excel power user. It's almost, because it's built on that same stack. It's just a lot of the things that are intuitive, are just easy to figure out in Power BI, as opposed to, I would argue, Tableau's Microsoft SQL reporting services, or maybe even Cognos, where you have to have some kind of extensive training in order to author reports. So we started looking at Power BI, thinking that might be a good solution for some of our less well-trained authors, people who were good power users, that we could just make a data set available to them and they could start to work on their own visualizations. I added Click here only because that's not one we're using at Pomona, but it is one I've used in my consulting life. So a couple hospital organizations I work with have Click. Which is kind of just another one of these products in the universe, and like the others, have pros and cons depending on what your purposes are. So this is just sort of the reality that we're facing. But with the advent of all of these tools, what we really started to hear from our users were a lot of complaints. So this little guy over here on the left is the Pomona College mascot. So I put him on there. He's supposed to look like he's complaining. So, we were trying to be responsive to people's needs, but what we were doing is actually creating kind of a lot of chaos, right? And so users are kind of saying to us, God, how many links are we going to have? Not just to all the different reporting tools, but even some of the other tools that we have across the college, things like logging into Cognos for your time card, or logging into Workday, which is our financial system, to file an expense report, or the college's main portal, right? And they all have these unique URLs, and you kind of have to keep track of them all. And that becomes really overwhelming if you're just the everyday user trying to do your job. The other question we were getting is, why do I have so many logins and passwords? So depending on how we had configured each of these kind of standalone reporting environments or tools, you may or may not have been able to authenticate with your Active Directory or your network password, username and password, right? Which creates this confusion. Why do I have so many different passwords, and they're different, and how do I keep track of them? And because I can't keep track of them, I'm going to write them down on a Post-it, and stick it on my desk where everybody can see it. So that could be a whole nother presentation, right? Like password management. We also obviously were getting people confused about, okay, I'm looking for the latest annual giving report that you showed us at some all hands meeting. I want to go find it, but how do I know which tool you wrote it in so that I can find it, right? Because if you have multiple reporting tools and you don't have any way that they're aggregated, that would kind of be the first thing you would have to know, is in what software was it written? And then now I go log into that software with one of my passwords, right? And then I find it from there. But that was an impediment to a lot of users, because, they don't want to even have to care, right? Whether it was written in Cognos or Tableau or SSRS, they just want that report. Other questions we were getting is just, why do we have so many reports? So, even if we had, prior to what I'm going to talk about in a minute, even if we had found a way to aggregate all of our reports into like a single monster menu, it still can be overwhelming if you're a user who really only needs 3, right? So if there's like 10, we probably at this point have thousands of reports written in different things. And any given user might need anywhere from 3 to 10 on a regular basis, right? And so being able to kind of search for what you need, but most importantly, we really wanted to think about a way where someone could kind of individually favorite or bookmark the top 5 that they need, right? So that they don't have to keep learning, like, okay, I go to this long list and then find this section and then find the one report I want as number 10 on the list of 20, right? And then finally, just why can't I seem to find anything? So not just in terms of reporting, but as I mentioned, even some of these other web-based services, but also even the question came up of trying to find documents, policies, and procedures. It's just, we've got stuff all over the place, right? You've got some things that are on network drives, some things that are in email, some things that are in different reporting tools, and it creates, again, a lot of confusion and mostly inefficiency. So, this pain is really real. And this is something that both in my Pomona life and consulting life try to really emphasize, is that without a really streamlined technological infrastructure and business intelligence environment, you're going to have a ton of inefficiency. And again, I would argue that for a nonprofit, that's almost inexcusable, right? Because you really want those resources to go to the highest purposes, not just a bunch of manual crap. And so I like these 2 quotes in particular. The typical enterprise with 1,000 knowledge worker wastes $6 to $12 million a year searching for non-existent information, failing to find information, or recreating information that can't be found, right? So you see that a lot. Like, we use Razor's Edge, and if you go to our query tab, you'll see, probably 25 different versions of kind of the same query. And it's just because, someone went in there, didn't know how to find the existing one, and so created another one. And sometimes they're exactly the same. Sometimes they're slightly different, but they're not slightly different for a good reason. So, depending on who comes in next to pull a query, they might pull the wrong one versus the right one. And then the second one, that BAE Systems conducted a study that discovered 80% of employees waste an average of a half an hour per day retrieving information, while 60% spend an hour or more duplicating the work of others. So I think if we all kind of asked ourselves this question, you know, how much of the day do you spend just looking for something? Like, where is that again? I know, you know, so to me, the holy grail is a work environment where you know exactly where to find things, and it's always the source of truth, and it's always the latest, and there aren't a million different versions, and there isn't that kind of confusion. That's probably not an achievable goal, but it's one that I think is just really important, especially for those of us in the advancement services world, to just keep trying to hammer, is that these kinds of structures matter, because if you don't put them in place, you end up with a lot of digital chaos and a lot of wasted time. Okay, so one possible solution, going back to the business intelligence environment, one possible solution to this predicament, like in our case where we had Cognos, Tableau, some Power BI reports, and then we purchased a big suite of SSRS reports from Raising Insight. One solution would have been to say, okay, we don't want to have our users have 4 different points of entry for their reports, right? We need to solve this problem. They need to have one menu they go to get all of their reports. So one option would be to rewrite every report we've ever written in Tableau or Cognos or Power BI and rewrite it in Microsoft SQL reporting services, and then add those reports to the Raising Insight menu. And I've actually heard organizations, you know, some of the group in the Raising Insight group are in that predicament. They have, you know, they bought Raising Insight, and then someone came on board who had some Tableau experience and built a bunch of Tableau visualizations. So now they're like, okay, now you need to scrap those Tableau visualizations, rewrite all of them in Microsoft SQL reporting services so that they keep in a single, you know, a single menu for our users, because we don't want them to have to log into Tableau and SSRS. And I totally get that, and theoretically that is an option. I would argue, though, that there are kind of 2 problems with that. Number one, it's hugely time consuming, especially depending on how many reports you had in one of the other platforms. So the amount of time it would have taken us to rewrite thousands of Cognos reports in Microsoft SQL reporting services would have been huge. And I'm not sure, you know, in other words, I don't think the solution, I don't think the benefit outweighs the amount of time it would have taken to do that. The other reason, though, is you might, you know, depending on your team, you might have somebody who's really skilled in your primary tool, which is Microsoft SQL reporting services, but you might also have someone who's more skilled in Tableau or Power BI. And while ideally you would want them to be skilled in all of the platforms, or certainly whatever you deem is sort of your primary platform, there's benefit in bringing in expertise from some of these other, you know, these other platforms. And so, you know, if it's easier and faster for one of your staff members to write something in Power BI than it is to write it in SQL reporting services, then why not give them that opportunity, right? But the biggest issue that I kind of have with that approach of like, okay, we need to pick one BI platform, everything needs to be written in that one platform so that, you know, we don't confuse our users and have to have them it eliminates the ability then for you to choose the best reporting tool for the right purpose. So you know, all of these tools are trying to kind of compete with one another to be able to do everything, but right now they all can't do everything. So as I mentioned before, Tableau is great for visualizations. It's great for interactivity. It's great for kind of high level aggregate views. It's not great at all for list reports or, you know, detailed kind of record by record sort of reports. It's not great for printing. It's not great for exporting into Excel in a printer friendly kind of way. It's also expensive, you know, so for some schools that cost can be prohibitive. Cognos is great for list reporting, great for scheduling reports. So that's something you can do within Cognos. I think you can do that in SQL reporting services as well, where you schedule certain reports that email to people automatically. You can't do that in Tableau. You can do something similar, but not exactly the same. And Cognos is adding kind of an analytics piece that's, I think, probably trying to compete with the Tableau space, but isn't doing that visualization stuff as well as Tableau. Cognos is also pretty expensive, you know, so Microsoft SQL reporting services is probably the closest to being able to do a wide variety of things, but is not as user-friendly as some other tools might be. Requires a semi-significant level of expertise in order to author reports. And unless you are on kind of the latest version, I believe, we haven't actually figured this out yet, but is not as good at doing mobile friendly reports. So Power BI is better for mobile friendly, and that's really where the trend is going, is being able to make business intelligence tools available on someone's phone or someone's iPad, right? So this is just a long way of saying is that by forcing you to use just one tool, right? It's almost like as if we said, okay, we bought Microsoft Office, but we only want you to use one product because it's going to confuse you if you have 3 different or 4 different products. So everything we've ever written in Excel or PowerPoint or Access now needs to be rewritten in Word, right? So theoretically, you could do it, but a lot of those PowerPoint and Access and certainly Excel reports would look bad in Word, and you would lose some of the functionality that are in those other tools. So, you know, from our point of view, we just wanted to think about, is there a way where we could aggregate all of these business intelligence tools and have it be sort of tool agnostic from the user side, right? So you could pick the tool you want to use, either because you're most familiar with it, because it's least expensive, because it has all the features that you want for that particular project or that particular data analysis need, and not have to be hindered by, but wait, am I going to be able to make this easy for a user to find? Okay, so what we wanted to find was, or what our quest was really, was, especially once we found ourselves with 3 different reporting systems, is there one ring to rule them all? Is there one way to aggregate all of these things so that we have one single point of entry for all of our systems and services, and not just those 3 reporting platforms, or eventually 4 when we move to Power BI, but even some of our other web-based tools. We have people on EverTrue. We have NXT, which is a client version, but there's a possibility we'll go to either NXT or a web-based version at some point. And some of the other college resources that I mentioned before, like Cognos and Workday and that kind of thing. Could there be one place that you would come to in the morning and have access to all of that? Could you have single sign-on so that was integrated with the college's Active Directory, and you use either or SAML, or we use CAS at Pomona, where you could just log into all of these tools using a single login? Could you have seamless integration of reports across different platforms? So again, from the user point of view, could you create an environment where, you know, they're pulling up a dashboard and maybe part of it is in Tableau and part of it's in Cognos, and they don't even have to care, you know, which reporting tool it was actually built in. And then finally, the ability for users to bookmark or favorite their commonly used reports. So as I mentioned before, even if you have a single point of entry, if that list of reports is overwhelming or too long, you're kind of, as an advancement services person, you sort of have 2 choices. You either just tell people, sorry, you know, go through the list and try to find your report. Maybe you could put in a search button that would allow you to kind of, you know, search for a keyword or a name, but they would have to do that every time. Or you could do, you know, kind of customized home pages for each person, where every time, you know, you would expose only the few reports that they want to see. But depending on how many users you have, that could be a lot of work for your team, right? And every time they want to add a new report or remove a new report, you have to kind of customize that for either an individual or a sort of mini team within the department. So we were trying to figure out, is there a way for a person to have a personalized experience that doesn't require intervention on our part, right? That they get to kind of govern that. So we found a product that is called Thea. So if you're interested in checking it out, their website is heythea.com. And it's a platform that you host locally. So it's not hosted with them. You buy the software, you install it on a server. It's a pretty lightweight application. So we set up a web server where it sits. And then what it does is it creates connectors to all of your other tools. So it doesn't bring in your data. It doesn't store data. It just simply provides the gateway to be able to get to your other tools. So all the security that you would manage in Cognos or Tableau or any of your other tools are still managed in those other tools. It's just that Thea is providing an opening or a portal for you to be able to integrate them. So I'll show you a bit of that in a moment. Most of the customers that are working with Thea right now are probably in industry, not so much nonprofits and higher ed. Pomona has been kind of all in with this, and so we've worked really, really closely with them to kind of continue to build it out for a higher ed environment. And I mean, I don't want to pitch too hard, but I think it's kind of amazing, and it's addressing a really critical need that we have. Now, what I would say though is it's just simply a platform. So you install it on your web server, and just like any platform, you know, it's only as useful as you configure it to be. And the Thea guys are really great about providing sample. They call them game boards. We call them dashboards at Pomona, but it's kind of the same concept. But they call them game boards, and they can provide some sample game boards for you to work with. But we spent quite a bit of time after we launched the Thea platform, just thinking about design. What do we want it to look like? What do we want our color scheme to be? What kinds of things should be available on the homepage? How do we want to structure the way people navigate through the platform for our users, right? So we took what was called Thea, and then we created what we rebranded as ConnectTo. So we had an old sort of advancement portal that had a few links on it back in the old days, and we called it Advancement Connect. So when we came up with this idea, one of our team members said, well, let's call it Advancement Connect 2, which is sort of a play on words because it's like number 2, but connecting to all of our resources. So this is sort of our branded name of Thea, right? So probably our users don't even know that this is built on Thea, right? They just know that we have a Pomona Advancement Connect 2 platform. So everybody says, where is that? And we just say Connect 2, Connect 2, Connect 2. So I'm actually going to jump in and just do a real live demo of it, since that's kind of the one benefit of not being in an auditorium where the internet connection might be bad. I'm going to go ahead and just jump in and sort of show you some stuff. So let me see if I can figure out how to get out of this presentation. So let's do that first. Patient with me for a second here. Okay, then we're going to remote into my computer. I'm going to shut my email. Okay, so we have, we gave everyone in the department a bookmark or a shortcut down here in the lower, see in my taskbar, there's these 2 little fingers, and those 2 little fingers represent kind of ConnectTo. So everyone in the department has a link to that, you know, or a shortcut to that ConnectTo platform. So this is integrated, as I mentioned, with our single sign-on, and we're using CAS in this case. So I'm going to go ahead and authenticate using my college's credentials. And we have Duo in our case, so I have to Duo myself. I'm going to say do it only for 30 days, so I don't have to keep doing it. And that's kind of what we encourage folks to do, is just log in first thing in the morning, and then you're going to have access to a lot of tools through this portal. So let me start first in the lower right-hand corner, which is our, we call these quick links. So these quick links are shortcuts to all of our college resources. So this is kind of the place where, you know, we have Box, and that has one link. We have, you know, a room reservation calendar. We have a ticketing system for IT to be able to submit tickets. We have a new thing we just set up, which is a training opportunity. So if someone needs training, they can go ahead and select, you know, a training type and be able to pick a time, and this automatically sets up a Zoom meeting between the customer and a member of my staff. So we wanted to make sure that that link was available to them. We have Black.net community, which has a separate login. So all of these things, anything that has an asterisk after it normally would have required another college login. But because this is all integrated now with single sign-in, if I go now click on Workday, for example, I don't have to re-authenticate, right? Because I've already done that through ConnectTo. So any of the college's resources, once we've gotten through this initial phase, are all available because of that original authentication. So that's a really handy, just, you know, shortcut to anything. And it can be a web link. It can be a link to a Box document. It can be any kind of link that we just want to have available to people. I'm going to kind of work in, I'm not going to go in an orderly way here. I'm going to show you a couple other resources. So we are an EverTrue client. And right now we have probably half the office on it, but we're about to launch this department wide. So rather than them having to remember, now where do I go to get EverTrue, right? We want them to see it as, okay, I logged in the morning, now I go straight to EverTrue and sign in. And that's actually now we're working with that also to get that integrated with single sign-on. This one's a little bit of a hokey workaround because we still have the client-based version of Razor's Edge, but we did build a little shortcut here. Hopefully this will work. that will actually launch the Razor's Edge product, right? So it's just a little shortcut that's built into this website. So again, it's not that someone couldn't go find Razor's Edge and log into it, but we wanted to kind of keep this again sort of common. Now, if you were a client that had NXT, you could certainly put the NXT link here, or you know, the web version of Advance, or whatever your product happens to be. This would be a great thing to put in place. Okay, now what we have is, we call these advancement bookmarks. So there's a set of reports that we kind of want everybody to have, you know, so we don't want you to have to go search for them and put them in your own personal bookmarks, but we just want to make sure that everybody has them, right? So if I go to advancement constituent profile, for example, what happens is it automatically then displays down in this viewer. So as the user, you don't have to know what's actually happening here is these 3 reports are written in Cognos, right? Because you can tell from this black bar. Down here, this is written in Cognos, these 3 are written in Tableau. But the user doesn't even have to care, right? It's sort of like, all right, I just want that report. I don't need to know. And it doesn't launch off into Cognos or Tableau. It just launches right from within here, right? So I could go look myself up. Hopefully I don't have anything embarrassing in my profile. I don't think so. Maybe my giving history, which is probably not the strongest. Okay, but anyway, I can go ahead and pull up a report right there. If I wanted to see a Tableau report, so this is an example of a Tableau visualization that was written to kind of talk about, you know, just illustrate how many alums we have. And if I want to make that bigger, I could go ahead and click do full page, and it's going to blow it up a bit. And now I can kind of explore through this visualization without having to go launch Tableau, log into Tableau, find the report, et cetera, right? In fact, I'm not even leaving ConnectTo at this point. Here's this recently hatched, by the way. These are new reports that we've written where we just wanted to say, hey, check this one out. You know, we've got some new reports going that we thought you might like to see. This is the one I was sort of alluding to earlier, where it's an event analysis and allows a user, I'll kind of let that run here for a second. And we'll come back. Oh no, here we go. Okay, so if we wanted to see, for example, let's go look at an event type and say, let's look at alumni weekend over a period of years, right? And so as soon as this renders, it's going to show us that alumni weekend, the green bar is registration, the blue bar is attendance. We can kind of hover over each of these to see, you know, is attendance going up or down over the years, right? And there's lots of different event types that can be queried upon through this, right? So again, one of the other beautiful things about creating this platform is that we don't get very many questions because people can just find their answers. And so the number of inquiries we get of, could I have this number? Could I have this report? I'm running to a meeting. Can you send me this? Has just gone way down from, you know, I wouldn't even be able to quantify it, but it's kind of shocking actually how few requests we get because people are able to get what they need. Now let's talk a little bit about my bookmarks. So what this is for is, let's say I go out to this search box and I search for the word annual, right? So I know that there's some annual giving reports out there. What this is doing now is searching across all of the reporting platforms. So it doesn't matter whether it's PowerBI, SSRS, or Cognos, it's going to search on either the name of that report or the metadata that you associate with it back in the original platform. So if I say, oh, I want to see this annual fund analysis, but you know, before I go bookmark it, let me make sure this is really the report I want to see, right? And so I look at it and I'm like, yep, that is the report I want to see. If you come over here to the right-hand side, I can say save to my bookmarks, right? So from now on, when I go back to my homepage, that report is going to appear right here in my bookmarks. If I decide later I don't want it, I can say remove it from my bookmarks, right? And it'll go away. So the user can then search from all of the department things across the board and then decide to whether or not he or she wants to bookmark it, right? Another very cool thing that this does, if you're a box user, is so we created, this is actually a different game board. This one is, so what you're looking at now, we called this My Dashboard. And in addition to doing all of this integration stuff, What we also wanted to be able to do was give everyone in the department high level visibility into the things that everyone cares about, right? So we have goals for the year, and the top two things that we focus on primarily is what is our fundraising goal for the year and what is our alumni participation goal for the year. And so what this is showing us, these two are Tableau reports, actually, these two little buttons here. This is a Tableau report right here, the Museum of Art Fundraising Progress, which actually is a kind of artifact called I think it's called a scrolling viewer or something, where you can put multiple reports in a single viewer and they can kind of scroll through like a carousel, right? This report over here is written in Cognos. So we're looking at a game board right now, or a dashboard page that has kind of a bunch of high level metrics, some level of detail over here in terms of the fundraising details, and two different reporting platforms, none of which the user really needs to care about at all, right? So now if we go over to dollars, this is a good example also of giving high level exposure to big benchmarks, right? So all of these little buttons up here are written in Tableau. All of these that are about to open in a second, hopefully they'll open in a second, are written in Microsoft SQL reporting services. So they were part of our package that we bought from Raising Insight. So I'm sure the internet's just being slow, but in a second they're going to appear. And then, yep, here we go. So these are little line charts that sort of are great visual illustrations of, okay, let's look at, you know, annual giving. Our goal is 5.1 for the year. We've raised 3.9 for this so far. And if we look at this red line, that's our current year results. The green line is our target. So we're kind of hovering right a little bit above target. If you look over here at Pomona Plan, you can see the red line is way above the green line. So we're trending way above our target for the year. So again, everybody can kind of quickly, so when we have big all hands meetings, we just bring this up on the screen and everybody can see these results right here. These are also Tableau reports, these two on the side. But then what's also great is sometimes people will say, okay, and I may not actually show you this because it'll have names in it, but I'll kind of hint at it, is that someone will say, okay, I want to see who are the donors that gave that $5.9 million. So each one of these tiles has what we call it a little drawer, and we create a drawer where you can put kind of detailed level reports under there. And these are written in Cognos. So again, we use the reporting tools that are good for visualizations up here, used SSRS here because we had visualizations. We're using Tableau to visualize data in a graphical sort of way. But when we want to be able to just pull a list report, or, you know, then we can go ahead and pull, and again, I won't blow this up since it has names in it, but I could also come here and from here export that into Excel. So I not only didn't need to know that it was Cognos, I didn't need to go into Cognos to be able to find it, and I don't need to go into Cognos to be able to export it. So that's kind of the beauty of that one. Same concept with participation. So one of the things that we were always getting questions of was like, how many of the trustees have made a gift this year? Or how many of our alumni board members have made a gift this year, right? We wanted to make that just really obvious for everybody. And so if you want to know, okay, we have a board of probably 40 trustees, there's 6 of them that still haven't made a gift yet. So we can quickly see that if someone's on their way out to a board meeting, and then we can click on, again, I won't actually run this because it'll have names in it, but it'll show those 6 people, right, with their phone numbers and their email addresses. And so from right there, you can go and contact those folks. Okay, I'm going to check on time here. So let's go back over to, so this, as I mentioned, is a single game board that has these different tabs on it, all of which you configure. So again, a lot of our work here was sort of thinking through, okay, what do we want this dashboard that everyone is going to have to look like, both in terms of design and colors, and what little portlets do we want to put on here, and what tabs do we want to show. And then once we create those tabs, you know, what reports should go in those sort of drill through drop downs? What are the reports that we want to have automatically bookmarked? But from there, you could also do kind of specialized game boards. So we created a specialized game board that's just really for my department. And so we call this, our acronym is AS-IS, Advancement Service and Information Systems. So this is our dashboard that everyone in the department can access. And what this is for is being able to submit. And so this is actually Smartsheet. So now again, because we're doing this, we're using Thea to aggregate things. We've got a smart sheet form right here where someone can go in and say, hey, I need a new, I need you to build me, I need a list, right? Like I'm going to do a mailing tomorrow and I need a list. And so they submit that, that goes into our smart sheet ticketing system. And this is a Tableau visualization that is reporting off of the smart sheet database. So we can, a user at any point can come in here and say, okay, I'm part of this division. Let me filter on that. What are my 9 tickets that are still open, right? But the other thing I was going to mention is that one of the connectors, in addition to Cognos, PowerBI, Microsoft SQL Reporting Services, and Tableau, is a connector to Box. So if somebody wanted to search for a Box document, so let's say you have a policy or a procedure out there, or in our case, we send out regular announcements, which then we archive in a Box folder that can be made available. So for example, we just sent out one, what's a good one? We sent out an announcement about our new Graduate platform that we had launched that we called Sage Connect. So this was the announcement that went out by email, but then we archived it so that anyone could find these documents. So going back to the main homepage, if we went to search, we could go up to, I'm going to get rid of this search, and search for a policy and procedure, right, as part of the Box documents. Let me refresh that real quick. So let's go over to search, and I'm going to go to documents. And from within this documents folder, I could search, or I could even just click on one of the folders and say, okay, I want to see, let's do people and places. Let's see the advancement org chart, right? So again, this requires some thought and organization in terms of how you structure your Box folders and which folders you make available to people through ConnectTo. But again, the beauty of it is that they don't have to go look for things, right? That those documents are going to be right there within that main platform. They don't have to log into something else to go find it, right? Let's see, there's another good one I can show you real quick. And that would be, well, let's just do another procedure. So let's say you want to know how to share your calendar with someone, right? So eventually all of our policies and procedures will be available through this Box connector. And so you would search on those just the same way you would search for a report, right? Okay, so going forward, some of the other things that we'll be doing are game boards that are specific to an area. So an example would be, we're looking at doing one around trustees. So for the people who manage the trustees, either our vice president or the secretary to the board, having just a simple, this is just a work in progress. So we haven't actually worked this out. But again, you're seeing a combination of Cognos and Tableau reports. We'll have a tab that just simply has lists and rosters that says, here are the mailing lists that are for trustees. We'll put a copy of the directory. So we're going to scan the actual directory that they give out to the give out to everyone with pictures of the board members. We'll scan that into Box and make that available here. There's a Tableau visualization that we're working on that will give kind of a breakdown of the trustees. So not everyone will necessarily need to see this trustee game board, but it follows the same concept as our central game board, which is combining a combination of visualizations, list reports, bookmarks, Box documents, all within one interface. Okay, I think I'm going to stop here and let's pull the PowerPoint back up again, if I can figure out how to get there. And we'll go back to prepare from current slide. Okay, not that slide. So let's just whiz through back to where we were. Okay, Thea, ConnectTo, here we go. So I'm just going to give a little bit of advice. With a project like this, it's like any project really. I think I heard this once at a conference, so I stole it from somebody, but I don't remember who said it. But his advice was, whenever you start a project, just think big, but start small and deliver results quickly. So I think we had a really great vision, which was, how do we aggregate all these tools? How do we create the kind of single point of entry? But we didn't try to write 1,000,000 game boards, right? We just thought, let's just start with one, which is my dashboard. make our highest level metrics available to people with the single point of entry for all the different tools. And then we'll roll with that for about 6 months, right? And then as we start to develop more expertise in the platform, or as needs are, come up, then we can continue to build out additional game boards, right? But sometimes we think too big and then we get sort of paralyzed, or we wait too long for everything to be perfect, right, before we actually launch something. So we really launched that whole game board probably in about 3 months, you know, of going back and forth to think about the design and what we were going to show and getting some preliminary user feedback. And then we just rolled with it and have made some kind of iterative changes since then. So I already covered kind of the second point, which is just focus first on something that can be deployed to everyone. And then after you get that done, you can start thinking about more additional kind of topic specific game boards. And I think that's it. I don't know if our environment here allows for questions. I was too used to doing this in person. But if you have any questions, feel free to email me at either of these 2 email addresses. I'm happy to give any advice. And I also have members of my Pomona team who did a lot of the heavy lifting on ConnectTo and would be great resources if you're interested in exploring this option. I think we finished a little early, but thank you, everybody. I hope you're all doing well and taking care, and I hope we all get to see each other in person next year. Bye-bye.